as well. We've done a few already, and they are up on the website now, including the one that we did on Tuesday. So our agenda for today, we'll do a brief introduction about these code amendments and then kind of dig in more to specific ones. We'll cover some development like accessory dwelling units, and then break to do some question and answers. Here's some discussion from everyone. And then we'll go back in and finish up with permit processes such as environmental review thresholds, and then do another Q&A session. Although if people still have questions on topics from the previous session, it's more than fine. We'll cover what we can. Just a brief note, please type your questions into the Q&A. You should see that bar on the bottom right in your WebEx screen. You're welcome to unmute yourself if you want to ask a question during the Q&A session. If you want to, you're more than welcome to do either. So I will turn it over to Nate to kick us off in regard to the guiding documents for these code amendments.
Thanks, Amanda. And I'd like to mention that we are going to record this session. So anything that is said here will be recorded. I was having a little trouble getting that started earlier, but it looks like it's working now. And I'd like to thank our support staff too. We have, I don't know if you mentioned, Amanda, we have Tate Andrew, who's our planning assistant at the City of Spokane, and he's going to be helping us with the question and answer session during the discussion. So
Yes,
looking forward to
thank
that.
you, Tate.
Yes, thanks. So I wanted to first review some documents that are guiding this effort. The comprehensive plan, of course, which is our Shaping Spokane comprehensive plan, originally adopted in 2001, and it does have a annual amendment cycle for typically text amendments or map amendments, and then a larger periodic update schedule every 8 years. And that was last updated in 2017. So this is that was the Shaping Spokane update. And the next update is 2026. And that last update did include policy focus groups that looked at text in the individual chapters, including the land use chapter and housing chapters of the plan. The housing update, the housing action plan, the documents indicated on the right were adopted last year, and that document and related documents spelled out several actions addressing the current housing affordability crisis that faces Spokane and the region, with a priority on increasing housing supply. And the city's share of these actions are still under that umbrella of the Shaping Spokane comprehensive plan. And just to put that in perspective, in terms of these actions that are part of this first phase that we'll discuss today, these are only some of the pieces from the housing action plan and related documents, and amount to about a quarter of the 17 overall strategies in that document. So this is not the full effort of the housing action plan. Looking at and turning to the graphic showing the different range of housing types in Spokane, the range being from single family and some of the different housing types as you look to the right along the spectrum. And the bottom of the portion of the screen represents and highlights some of the housing types of focus for more flexibility in this the development forms for these first phase amendments we're discussing today. So that would impact single family residences, and then moving to the right, transitional sites and accessory dwelling units, duplexes, attached housing, and these are all part of this first phase of amendments that we're discussing. And as far as single family homes, detached single family, can that still be built? Yes, single family homes can still be built everywhere they're allowed now but the change would be to, in some cases, for the appearance of a single family home, or in some cases where other types of housing are allowed. So Spokane does allow for single family construction alongside multifamily construction in all areas where multifamily construction is permitted. Looking back at the past decade and a half of residential code amendments, the city originally adopted the Residential Development Code as part of the Unified Development Code in 2006 that implemented the comprehensive plan that included new housing types such as cottage housing, attached housing, and detached accessory dwelling units. And separate, the detached meaning separate accessory dwelling units. There were internal accessory dwelling units before. And then changes since then included in 2012 following an infill housing task force for more compact zoning, for garage wall limitations, and a new form of development of pocket residential, except for some of the residential zones, such as for residential agricultural and residential single family. And then in 2014, unit lot subdivisions were added for pre-existing development, and then that was later expanded following the 2018 and 2019 infill development code revisions, including for cottage housing changes, pocket residential and compact lots in more areas, attached homes and parking transitions, and then some height exceptions added to allow for taller height in higher density zones, such as residential multifamily, residential high density. And so all along the way, this has been a discussion with the community about changes to allow more housing types and more housing forms, and demonstrates sort of the record of that discussion with the community. And you can find we have a project webpage for infill housing strategies on the city's website. So today, following the topics in your agenda, we'll give a background for each of these topic areas for the phase one only, and then discuss. And so looking at amendments in phase one that are proposed for new residential development, like duplexes and attached housing, and permit processes like subdivisions up to 9 lots and review thresholds under the State Environmental Policy Act. And these phase one items are more of those short and midterm threshold proposals that were informed by the Housing Action Plan. And then the longer term changes would come in phase two. Those were flagged as longer term or major development code amendments or plan amendments. So for new residential development, our presentation first starts with these 4 topic areas, with regulations for expanding the ability to develop these housing types on that are familiar to accommodate new residential development. And then following that, we'll have a period for questions and answers on those topics. And then, as Amanda mentioned, we'll go back at about 10 minutes to 5. We'll cover the permit processes that are shown on the right to accommodate residential and other development. Starting with new residential development, first related to accessory dwelling units. These, what makes these accessory are that they're sometimes called a second unit or mother-in-law suite, granny flat, or they're sometimes called a laneway home. They're along an alley. They're secondary to a primary single-family dwelling, and so they're limited in size and appearance. Sometimes they're attached and internal to the unit. And you can already build in Spokane what's shown here in the graphic. So these are a couple of different arrangements or a few different arrangements, whether attached or detached or in an attic or a basement. And you may have seen a few being built. And in Spokane, the recent permits have included 20 or so per year on average. And the Housing Action Plan calls for the city to revise standards for accessory dwelling units to allow for additional flexibility. So kind of giving an orientation, you'll see here the code citation at the upper right. That's that upper right-hand corner, and that's consistent in the following slides for these different topics. And then the lower right, you'll see the city is directed by these guidance documents to make these changes. So there's a citation of that, of those sources there. And then as far as the changes proposed for accessory dwelling units, that includes how big the unit is overall, being more flexible in terms of size and height and other dimensional characteristics. And other changes include flexibility to design and the roof form of the accessory dwelling unit, proposed reduction of parking requirements. Currently, there is a one parking stall required each time an accessory dwelling unit is built. And so looking at some kind of a reduction, whether eliminating that parking requirement or allowing for studio or one bedroom accessory dwelling units to not have a parking spot, and then only requiring it for 2-bedroom units. And then finally, this fourth item for exploring removing the requirement for an owner to live in either the accessory dwelling unit or the main residence. And there's some talk of perhaps a phase in of that requirement. So such as 3 years after construction. So if the accessory unit already exists and it's been 3 years, at that point, both of the units could be rented. Currently, a covenant is recorded on the property that enforces that the owner has to live on site. So those are some of the changes proposed to accessory dwelling units. And next, we'll look at a couple of different housing types. So leaving accessory dwelling units as a regulated housing type, these different terms apply to these two types. So we'll kind of do a quick overview here of the differences. The duplex, which is on the left side of the street, is allowed to be built in residential 2-family zones and other zones that allow multifamily development now in Spokane. The duplex is a building that contains 2 primary dwelling units on one lot, and those units must share a common wall or common floor ceiling. So you can see each building is on its own separate lot, but there's 2 units within each building. And then across the street on the right side is a development form that looks similar, but especially when viewed from the street, but it's attached housing. That's 2 or more dwelling units that are single-family residences on individual lots. And this is allowed in all areas that allow residential uses, including the residential single-family zone. And these are attached by a common wall at a shared property line. So you can see that reflected when you look at the photo viewed from above on the right. You see that property line. And then viewed from the street, they don't look very different. Walking by, people may not be able to detect the different ownership arrangements within these 2 types. And again, duplexes are not normally allowed in the residential single-family zone, whereas attached housing is. So with regard to duplexes, the Housing Action Plan recommends expanding allowed housing types to encourage missing middle housing throughout Spokane's neighborhood, all Spokane's neighborhoods. And missing middle refers to types of housing that are relatively rare because a lot of housing is either single-family detached that's being built or and exists in Spokane, or it's larger apartments. And so a duplex is one of those forms kind of that we're talking about today, which is somewhere in the middle and is relatively rare. So what can be done to promote variety in that missing middle? The proposal is for more duplexes in more areas. That would be a shift from the current exclusive single family zoning that much of the city has, and then looking at where in that area, what areas would be appropriate. So proximity to transit corridors or to centers that are served by transit, or perhaps only in new larger developments, or it could be limited to only corner lots where streets intersect, or some combination of those areas, or for example, to allow on all lots. So looking at and testing design and ideas for duplexes in residential single family areas. And so along with that, we are proposing looking at updating design standards, because hearing from the community and discussing the impact of vehicle access to the new units in design and orientation, and then the appearance to maintain compatibility with what often is going to be an existing neighborhood. And in new construction, where you have an established neighborhood alongside new construction. And again, we're also exploring and discussing where duplexes are appropriate. And as soon as Amanda finishes introducing the next two topics, we want to get your thoughts on that question. So I'll hand it over to you now, Amanda.
Thanks. So another missing middle housing type that this project is looking at is attached housing or townhomes. We want to allow for more housing like this, which adds variety in the city. Like single-family detached, townhomes are permitted in all residential zones. So with this amendment, we're looking at revising the maximum number of attached units that are permitted by right in residential single family and then the residential single family compact zones, so that a developer could build more than 2 attached units without having to go through the planned unit development process, which is, it's a little bit more time consuming. It's certainly another layer in the development pipeline. In addition to that, we're looking to revise design standards for attached homes as well. So similar to the same ideas with duplexes. There are design standards in place, but we're looking at ways to de-emphasize garage dominance and those multiple curb cuts that go with that, to try and make the pedestrian environment more inviting and also safer, while encouraging quality design that is responsive to the neighborhood character without having to continuously replicate what's existing. So the rendering on screen shows 8 attached units, which would be permitted in our residential multifamily or residential high density zones. For all of our other residential zones, that would require going through a PUD right now. The last section of code related to new residential development is lot size transitions. For parcels that are 2 acres or greater in the city that are within residential agriculture and residential single family zones, we require that some of the newly created lots transition in size to complement the existing lots within a neighborhood. So what that looks like is, if you have existing average lot size that's over 7,200 square feet, then the transition lots cannot be smaller than 7,200 square feet. If you happen to be on a block that has an average lot size that's less than 7,200 square feet, those transition lots can be the average for the lot, or they can be larger, as long as they're meeting the underlying dimensional requirements for whichever zone that you're in. So we're discussing with Plan Commission a range of options on how to amend this section. One of the options might be eliminating this requirement, or some of the other ones might be to revise it so the transition lots cannot be smaller than 75% of the block average. Or additionally, a much more scaled back change would be to not require transitioning across right-of-way, because right now, if you are adjacent to lots across a right-of-way that are also zoned RA or RSF, you would be required to count them into your averaging for your lot size. So we might just remove the requirement so you don't have to count lots that are across the right-of-way, and also remove a requirement that if you did a planned unit development, you would need to do lot size transitions either. So we did discuss this yesterday on Wednesday with Plan Commission in a little bit more detail we had introduced this back in December. And that's just to kind of give us some time to weigh the options with them and then also get direction from them what they think makes the most sense moving forward. So we're hoping to have some draft language for them to look at in the near future. So, sorry for the misdirection earlier. Please type your questions into the chat, which you'll see. Feel free, if you would like, you're welcome to, if you're affiliated, if you're commenting as an organization, what organization you're affiliated with. But we wanted to open up to see what kind of questions people had. The stuff you see on screen is just in case anyone's feeling shy to get us started, but I will look to you, Tate, to see if there's anything that we've gotten so far.
Yeah, nothing quite yet, but we'll give some time for people to type their stuff.
Yeah, so these are some sort of questions that people can respond to. I think we've been talking about the prevalence of duplexes. Some neighborhoods have historically had duplex development, and then maybe the zoning has changed. And then some neighborhoods have been, always been single family, and so we're beginning to see more accessory dwelling unit construction in more neighborhoods. So thinking about what are the consequences of that, positive and negative of that new construction, or maybe being in an older neighborhood and having those legacy uses in terms of integration.
So Brian wrote in, not really lot sizes, more the placement of the building on the site. Could you just expand on that a little bit? Are you more interested in how those buildings are sited on the site and less about size?
Site plan trumps architecture and design.
Yeah, so hi, this is Brian. I wrote that. Just my take is I notice when there's an excessively deep setback or,
Mm.
a building is really pushed back from the street, or it's particularly close to the street. When you walk through West Central, you see a lot more of that. You see a lot more front porches, those kind of things. The placement of the building on the site. For me has more bearing than necessarily lot size. I mean, I think when you go into a place like West Central versus say an Eagle Ridge, you notice the differences outright. But for infill and existing properties, you notice when there's a break in that trend, I guess.
Sure.
And you have a larger apartment building adjacent to it, and if that apartment building turns its back on the street. There's a really good example, I think, on Broadway, close to the Dutch Jake's Park, where an apartment building was put. I think it's on the corner of Chestnut and Broadway. It just breaks the rhythm of the entire section of that block because it's oriented differently. It doesn't fit in, and it's on a bigger lot, so it doesn't really respect what exists within the neighborhood. So
Yeah, I think some of the things being discussed would be to allow for more porch projection in the front, like say 6 feet closer. So that might help address. I think the corner lot is a little tricky because you can allow parking on one side or the other. So that's something to keep in mind is entry orientation to both streets when on a corner lot.
Yeah, and those kind of details are definitely something that we went into depth with yesterday. Our consultant was presenting to Plan Commission on the different things that we're considering on how to do as to get to that higher quality design in regard to, like, are they orienting towards the street? Are we allowing projections for things like front porches? We're trying to get that up on the website as quickly as we can, but it'll be available if anyone is curious and wants to watch it. So Becky asked if being zoned for single family does not necessarily demand unattached single family homes, and that's so correct. You could build something right now in residential single family or residential single family compact. You could do 2 attached units. If you wanted to do more, a developer could. You just go through the additional process of a planned unit development.
Yeah, and also the plan really regulates density, right? More than it does mention 1 and 2 family residences, but in appropriate areas. But it also there's a density restriction.
Dr. Margot Hill asked, what does our current housing inventory look like? Isn't it clear that we need middle missing housing options?
Yeah, great question. There's a housing needs assessment with some housing inventory numbers in as part of the housing action plan. So, but it does reflect the relative scarcity of attached housing and some of the smaller multifamily examples. So yes, the housing action plan has a whole priority about increasing housing supply, including a strategy that is really the focus of this effort to increase and diversify the missing middle housing. This second discussion question on the screen is really maybe more related to what Brian was talking about, but you may not think about lot sizes changing, but there may be some of you that do, some others besides Brian. And I know as a planner, we think about the differences in lot sizes and how neighborhoods are laid out. So might be a different way of thinking about things.
So
Question from JT asks, as housing gets denser, would street and sidewalk improvements also need to be factored into the design plan?
So it's a little bit tricky when you're doing infill. Usually that would be already in place. Anything that was torn up during construction would need to be rebuilt to current city standards. So it kind of depends on if we're talking about 1 or 2 units that are going into an existing neighborhood versus, let's say in the future, someone was able to buy all the houses on a block and they redid a whole block. It's a little bit harder to do offsite improvements when it's just 1 single family or 2 attached units or something like that. But certainly, I think with the different departments we have in the city, with an urban forestry focus and all of that, it's still something that we're looking at in a multi-layered approach when land use or building permits come in.
Becky asks, does the study address infrastructure such as access roads?
So the code amendments that we're looking at aren't looking at infrastructure. There is another code amendment being put forward by the city in regard to short plats, which we'll talk about in the next session. Just looking at the different kinds of development you might do when you're subdividing 9 or fewer lots. And if you have access to infrastructure, like is the road built? Is there water and sewer available, or do those things need to be extended to make that development functional? But no, we're not necessarily looking at changing code language about infrastructure. Mostly what the focus is for these code changes is development within not necessarily core areas of the city, but certainly within areas of the city that are already served by infrastructure. We're trying to encourage that denser development and rather than going the sprawl route. So these are lots that should already be served by the existing city infrastructure, or if they're not, it's just a matter of like extending what's existing from a main line.
Yeah, and in terms of access to the lot, that could be a private access. So that is something to consider how that impacts the public infrastructure, such as streets and sidewalks.
Sally Phillips is interested in lot sizes for attached homes.
So our regulations require that you are meeting whatever the width and lot depth dimensions and the minimum square footage for your zoning district. So you could go as small as 4,350 square feet in the RSF zone. It kind of depends on the size of the parcel, you know, like you can try and do a back of an envelope and see if you have a parcel, this is the size, like how many lots you could get. But when you start to factor in some of the stuff like Nate mentioned, say like a shared access drive, you're still meeting that base requirement for whatever your zone is.
Yeah, and then we have, pocket residential development too, which allows for some flexibility on that lot size, especially for attached housing. It's sometimes it's been called a planned unit development light, so it's not quite the same approval as a planned unit development, but does allow that flexibility in site design.
Becky asks, I am thinking of the area of the city west of 195. Does the study mimic a moratorium for our area?
So I'm not sure I fully understand your question, Becky, but no, so we're not proposing any sort of moratorium. Some of the main goals with all of the code amendments that we're looking at is trying to streamline our processes and our development requirements, so it's more clear, if you will, to developers. There's less back and forth in the development pipeline when they're doing construction for housing of any type.
Yeah, that current restriction on new subdivisions could impact like some smaller subdivisions, like short plats in that area. But as far as if the lot's already created, I'm not sure that's the same level. There's a lot of larger developments that have been held up because of the 195 study.
Tanya Smith comments, with more density, parking becomes an issue. Parking requirements should stay. So maybe we could talk about parking a little bit.
Yeah, so currently the city requires one parking space per dwelling unit, and then one additional space for every bedroom over 3. And there is some flexibility to that. We talked about in the last open house session how there's an administrative waiver when the development provides a pedestrian friendly environment. And usually there's like access to a transit supportive environment. And then there's also flexibility to allow on-street parking when it's available to count for required off-street parking. But yeah, eliminating parking requirements for accessory dwelling units, that could have consequences for especially in areas where there's less availability. So that's why we're looking at a tiered approach to 2 bedrooms still requiring a parking space. So what do folks think about that? I mean, it does become a housing affordability issue as well. It becomes an expense to incorporate parking in the development. A lot of these smaller housing forms are oriented toward that more affordable to the lower income bands.
Got a comment from Dr. Naomi Bender. She asked, does the study consider the considerable changes in the increased cost of supply and demand for building these dwellings versus tenants' ability to meet the cost of living? As the increased cost of living have skyrocketed in Spokane, folks' incomes have not inflated alongside these demands.
So a lot of that research was done during the Housing Action Plan with the needs assessment. So we have a fairly good idea of, now after going through that process, where the housing types, if you will, fall in that spectrum in regard to what percentage someone might be making of the area median income. So, I mean, it's kind of a balancing act for sure of trying to encourage construction by private developers or affordable from nonprofit agencies, while recognizing that the cost of living has skyrocketed, and so have the materials that people are buying to build these, which ultimately that cost of the raw materials is going to get passed on to at least the first couple of tenants or the first home buyer.
Yeah, I put a link to the Housing Action Plan in the chat if you're interested.
Seems there's some dialogue just about parking. Not really any questions yet further on it, but I can further read the parking dialogue if you'd like.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Let me just scroll up a little bit. So Brian Jennings commented, parking can be a barrier to infill development on smaller lots, triggers stormwater requirements as well, which is tough to achieve parking and stormwater and housing. Tanya Smith comments, just seeing a little hostility with parking sometimes. Most people have a car or two despite transit options. Just for public safety, parking should be considered seriously.
Yeah, those are both true sides of this issue.
And I am making note of everybody's comments to make sure everybody's opinions are noted as well.
Thanks, Tate. Well, and so it's something that, the planning profession nationally is definitely looking at, and we're also looking at here within the city. There's some transit-oriented development projects that we've been coordinating regionally. So the Division Connects project that's looking at the Division Ruby couplet all the way up Division into the county to support that bus rapid transit line that'll eventually be built. And everything that's been shown to be built already is that mixed use is supportive, but it really needs to have a base of that residential. And so the problem with getting that amount of density along an arterial like that is you have to sacrifice the minimum parking in the hopes that those tenants use high performance transit, and then when they're at work or at school, whatever it is they're doing during the day, the people who are customers or employees of those mixed use portions, whether it's commercial, retail, or office, are then also using that transit line for lunch or making quick errands, going to other places along the arterial. But on the flip side of that, yes, there can be pinch points around parking in a neighborhood, especially because most households have more than one car these days, or it's multi-generational, and so they need more than one car.
I'm not seeing any comments that kind of further this conversation.
Okay.
Yeah, well, if we don't have too much more discussion on this, we might transition over to permit processes. That way we have enough time to kind of do question and answers for people on those code amendments. We can give it just a second in case anyone's typing.
Thomas just adds, having the option to rent a cheaper space without parking is nice for people who do not own a car. And then Becky comments, I'm just made that you are accepting the paradigm that cars are a norm for our residents. So just some more opinion on parking requirements.
Yeah, that is a interesting point, because there are households, we see reflected in demographic data that don't have a car. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and proceed then. Keep those thoughts coming in. Looks like there's some more thoughts on parking, and we can maybe circle back. I'll go ahead and share my screen. So proceeding now to the second portion of our topics, and we'll give a quick overview of 3 permit processes that we're looking as part of this package of this phase of code amendments implementing the Housing Action Plan and related documents. First is for short subdivisions up to 9 lots. For these applications, they start with land. Basic components are land and a survey, and then an application, and that leads to the public process process and decision. So that's indicated at the far right here. That's the focus of the change for short subdivision applications as part of these amendments. After preliminary approval, after that decision, there may be construction of utilities, which Amanda mentioned earlier, utilities or streets or other improvements to prepare those lots for development. And at this stage, the fewer number of lots proposed, so remember it's up to 9 lots, so it could be 2 or 3 lots, that could mean a different level of construction just based on numbers. And so kind of thinking about short subdivisions, this is just one way that sites can be prepared for development. As we mentioned earlier, there are larger developments, and then there's also land that's already separated and ready for development. And then the final document that's recorded with Spokane County is the final plat or map of the short subdivision. So the point is to continue to streamline from the Housing Action Plan, streamline and simplify changes to the city's permit process as necessary, and adopting other permit process improvements where it's demonstrated that some kind of a change will result in more efficient permit process for customers. So reducing the cost through the notification method might mean that a 2-lot short plat that provides no notice, this would be kind of the greatest change, but it would only affect the smaller projects. And then for basically 2 lots, short plat only creates 1 additional lot, in other words. And then for short plats with 3 or more lots, the proposal is to continue mailed notice to the notification area near the site, but to eliminate the requirement to have a posted notice sign on the site. And these are so no longer requiring that posted notice sign. That could reduce cost in some way. And then further direction from the Housing Action Plan is looking at those permitting processes for housing that expand housing options and support a broader range of household incomes. So again, we're looking for continued improvements on processes, especially affecting smaller developments. And the proposed changes after they affect the part of the application after it's determined complete and has already received comments from agencies. So that would reduce the cost of processing and reducing it most where the comment period is removed in these proposed amendments for 2-lot projects only. Again, where fewer lots are created. So in that way, the change would be scaled to the project by definition. And then that would reduce processing time, such as removing notice would deliver a decision potentially more quickly, so the lots could be built on sooner. And then Amanda, you ready to present short-term rentals on the next slide?
So short-term rentals or vacation rentals are allowed as a type of residential use in our residential zones through a permit. And then our code outlines that renting a residential unit is to the guests for a short-term use of the home. So that's periods less than 30 nights. Our code outlines two different types of short-term rentals. So we have one that's similar to like a typical use of a residential home, whether that's just a bedroom or the whole unit itself. And then we have another type that's more similar to bed and breakfast. So it has space for what you might consider like a banquet or a commercial meeting space. So with this code revision, we're proposing to allow short-term rentals in non-residential zones where residential uses are permitted without that short-term rental being classified as a hotel motel use. So currently, if you were to do a short-term rental now, say in a non-residential zone, you'd be classified as a hotel motel use, which is different than something that would be considered accessory to a residential unit. So the goal with this one is to bring existing units into compliance, which allows us to enforce the life and safety regulations of the building and fire code and recover staff costs that we go through to permit these uses. But it also really helps guide the city in the next round of code changes, which will address, what's the right number of short-term rentals as a percentage of the housing supply, what's the best kind of code language that we can either model or borrow, if you will, from other localities that addresses the impact to the housing supply. So what effects it's already having. Certainly, we know from anecdotal evidence, if you just go on Airbnb or VRBO, there are more units than are actually going through the appropriate permitting process. So we're trying to bring those ones into compliance. That way we know that they're safe. And also it gives us a better idea of how many units those are, because unfortunately, those platforms have different aims than we do. As the city, we might want to know what's the number. And one of those platforms, whether it's Airbnb or VRBO, that's not their main goal. Their main goal may not be to share the most accurate information with the city. Their goal is the revenue. So that's something that we're looking at in regard to permit processes. Another one that we are looking at, and it's the last one of all of these code amendments, is environmental reviews required by the State Environmental Policy Act, or SEPA, which is our foundational environmental law, and outlines what sort of projects must have an environmental review before permitting can be approved. So the Washington Administrative Code outlines some types of projects or activities which can be exempted from this review. So when the city conducts an environmental review, a threshold determination is issued, which kicks off a 14-day comment period. Right now, that would be the SEPA notice, and then also sites are often posted for whatever parcel the activity is being proposed on. So what you see on screen is a comparison of our current standards on the left, and then the maximum threshold permitted by WAC on the right. Oops. Sorry about that. So we're evaluating whether to adopt the maximum flexible thresholds permitted by WAC as discussed with the Plan Commission on January 12th. What this could look like is that a 25-unit multifamily building would currently require environmental review, but under the threshold permitted by WAC, that project would be exempted from review. So no SEPA notice would be sent to agencies, no site posting. Obviously, if there's anything discovered on site in regard to, like, say there's an unknown stream or an unnamed stream, or cultural resources might be found, or like some sort of historic resource, work would stop and that would be evaluated appropriately before work continued. But so this code change is more involved than the previous ones we've discussed, if you can imagine that. And one of the things that we're required to do a 60-day public comment period and notify agencies, tribes, interested parties. So while we're talking about this code change, it is not ready to go to public hearing. we're still working through all of the steps and making sure that we're doing the right kind of engagement. Some of the stuff that we've done in regard to this is we've reached out to the Department of Ecology and also the Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation. We'll be meeting with the tribes also before we even kick off that 60-day public comment period. But ultimately, with all of the other code amendments, this one is similar in the respect that we're trying to balance notice, protecting cultural resources while streamlining development, so we encourage construction of more housing. So I noticed a couple pop-ups coming up in the chat, so why don't we open discussion?
Yeah, there is a comment from Naomi Bender that we should circle back to. But in terms of staying on topic with the second part of this, I'll start with Theodore's comment about the notification process. They say, I would not support this. The notification process seems pretty minimal already, and in my experience, loosely interpreted by the city and landowners. If you want to remove a requirement to list in the newspaper or something like that, I can understand, but on-site signage or direct mail notice are the only way people would be aware of what's happening in their neighborhood. And Tanya and Robert added that they agree.
Yeah, so this one is interesting. There's been a trend across the state for encouragement of adopting that maximum threshold. So this is one of the code changes that's been encouraged by RCW 3670A600. And there have been, regardless of whether it's on the west or the east side of the state, there's been a lot more localities that are doing that. So like for us locally, one of the localities that does that currently is Spokane Valley. So we're hearing from like infill developers and some of our more regional, larger developers that this is one of the things that they think we need to align better on. So we're trying to thread the needle of how do we allow people to still get notice in regard to what's happening in their neighborhood, while also recognizing that this can have an impact on development or encouraging that construction of housing. Certainly, if you have a 6-month construction loan, 2 weeks already taken out of that, in addition to some other things, the back and forth of review can really make or break whether you can do a project or not.
And are you talking about the mainly the SEPA notification, or for the short plat notification, or both?
I believe he was talking about the short plat based on what the comment came in, but obviously he can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think it's sort of the similar principle where it's it's defined that for short plats, for example, that cities can determine their own methods, whereas it's more prescribed in state law for projects that have more than 10 lots. And a hearing is required. And then similarly for the SEPA categorical exemptions, that the levels have been raised to which cities and counties can raise their exempt levels to. There's discussion in the legislature to raise those even more. We've been learning the past few weeks, so it really is kind of geared toward modern methods of notification. We do have, I want to acknowledge that we did neighborhood notification change in 2015, which I think some of you may have been recipients of that neighborhood notification and are more aware now of those projects. And so similarly for State Environmental Policy Act, which was originally adopted in 1971, there have been quite a bit of changes since then, and new regulation and new legislation.
Brian Jennings adds, I think the scale of the infill being proposed should be considered. Putting in 3 units where one previously existed versus 5+ units is entirely different. Do they both need the same notification?
Yeah, it probably depends on the project. I know that a lot of the 2-lot short plats are really don't involve a lot of change to, I think in a recent year, there were about half of the applications for short plats received were for just 2-lot short plats. And of those, most of them, maybe a dozen or so, didn't have any improvements to the public right of way. The utilities were, in other words, were already adjacent to the sites. So that obviously would have typically less impact on, or a neighbor may not even really notice until the house is built.
Yeah, I think wasn't the trend with a lot of those particular application types, it's often just someone doing a lot split, so the 2 lots, so there's already a house existing, so really the biggest change is adding maybe 1, maybe 2 houses to an existing block.
Yeah, and there's some more dialogue kind of talking about this, but I'll jump to another question from Becky. She asked, have you made any projections based on the study how the housing crisis in Spokane will be affected?
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit last time. So, or in the last open house session, a similar question was asked. I think this is more of a coordinated effort with other efforts. I know that we have submitted a grant application to the State Department of Commerce, and were awarded that grant. And in that grant application, we were projecting some increases in accessory dwelling unit construction just based on similar changes at other cities. So perhaps doubling over a 20-year period. That would have the effect of having these smaller units more of them available for the for that population and for the overall supply. I think there was kind of I saw kind of related comment or a question about thinking about income, housing situation needs, etc. This is from Dr. Bender earlier, and looks like what's the city doing to meet low-income folks' current housing situation needs? Basically, is the thrust of that. And I think the city this is one small part of the city's efforts, of course, but there's been changes to the state legislature, new legislation that I think maybe overarching is in our next update. The city and county will coordinate for strategies to provide sufficient housing for all income levels. And so there's this focus on a variety of housing options now in our comprehensive plan. And so these are sort of targeted at those changes that we can make currently, even before we start to answer that broader question, which we know is coming in the next few years.
Right. And I think that these code amendments are really, we tried to ground them in the work that was done through the Housing Action Plan. So, there was an extensive amount of research that informed the strategies and just the general vision of the plan in general. And so we've tried to align the sections of code that we chose to really fit with short-term or midterm strategies that were recommended in the Housing Action Plan as something that could be implemented with, not a lot of time in between starting and getting it adopted, or perhaps wasn't very costly to make the change. So we're trying to kind of get at the low-hanging fruit first. But as Nate said, it's not, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's other stuff that we are hoping to do and we'll be taking action on.
I have a few more comments coming in. Theodore just adds, to answer the question on the slide, yes, I think it is useful for residents to get a mailer. Residents, not just landlords or owners. I also
Mhm.
think it is critical that neighborhood councils get notified as well, preferably during the agency comment period, to give them time to speak to their membership about the proposal.
Yeah, and that's not proposed to change. That would still be conducted.
Mhm.
Would just be the public notice occurring after the determination of completeness.
Sounds like Tanya Smith agrees with Theodore. She adds that. Question from Sally Phillips. I understand the purpose of notifying residents when there is a proposed zone or use change. What are the issues that a neighborhood can comment on when it's a 2-lot short plat?
Yeah, that is an issue to think about, is what comments, what can comments hope to achieve, and do they change the outcome, or at that scale, is there, the city can't necessarily deny the permit just because the application, if it complies with all of the requirements that the city has to meet, its timelines as outlined in law, and the applicant deserves a fair assessment, just like any other applicant. So there can be useful information exchanged at that stage, but again, with the scale of these projects in consideration, um, it does kind of call into question.
Yeah, what I will say also is I think our current planners are really good about trying to let people know when notice is sent. Like they try and help people navigate the development pipeline to say, like, these are useful things that you can comment on, or if you have concerns, this is how to go about it. So I definitely think that our current planners try and be useful when there is a public comment period and when people reach out to them about a project. So.
We've heard too that the posted notice sign doesn't contain as much useful information as the mailed notice. So we're continuing that for larger projects, up to 9 lots. That would still maybe contain, more of the details.
I haven't got any more questions, but just some more comments. Theodore just adds he has a 2-lot short plat happening right next door to his house, and I sent in a comment in support after learning about the proposal. Tanya Smith answers question 2, saying yes, there are rooms for rent, and that brings in several more vehicles. Brian adds people will tend to think they can recommend changes to the development on a 2-lot short plat in some cases and get frustrated that they can do little. And Theodore just adds, Brian, that is part of the learning process, but I think you'll get a lot more angst from folks when things happen without their awareness overall. So just to have a dialogue happening.
To Tanya's point about short-term rentals, yes. So we are trying to craft some code language about short-term rentals to try and mitigate for and deter that kind of party house, if you will, or other negative impacts from short-term rentals. I know that there can be issues with whole residential units, like whole houses being rented either as a whole or one off with each individual bedroom. And certainly we want to try and find a way to help lessen those negative impacts, whether it's parking or noise or privacy concerns.
Yeah, it's something to consider too, in terms of the use of ADUs as short-term rentals, and what happens if the parking requirement is changed. Does that change for, if it becomes a short-term rental?
Well, I'll give some time in case people want to type some stuff in, but I just want to make sure if there's any outstanding questions, whether on the permit processes or the code amendments related to new residential development, if anyone has anything outstanding, we can try and address it. All right, well, I'll consider that last call. Let's touch on the last couple of slides that we have. So as mentioned previously, we want to collect people's public comment. So we'd encourage you, you are welcome to make public comment to our development code at spokanecity.org email address. That's the dedicated email address for this project. Alternatively, you're more than welcome to contact Nate or myself. Both of our email addresses and direct lines are on the screen.
I still see the discussion slide, Amanda.
Oh, okay, yeah, I'll go back.
I'm not sure why. Might just be me.
Oh, that's right. Okay, sorry. Paused you guys. All right, there we go. The development code email address that's now on screen. As we mentioned earlier, so all of the information as it becomes available about each of these code amendments will be posted on the project webpage. So we have cut sheets right now about each of them, kind of detailing what is currently permitted by code, what changes are proposed, how we think that might change or, not really change dramatically in a neighborhood. And then once that draft code is available, we'll be uploading it onto the website as well for each of the code amendments. We do have several of the presentations from the last couple months up there as well. So as far as what we have upcoming, we are planning an additional workshop with the Plan Commission, and we're hoping to be before them again in March. And then we would like to do a study session with City Council, and we're hoping to do that in February. So once we have dates confirmed, we'll send out a notice to the interested parties email list for this project. You can also find it on the project webpage as well. And then of course, once the public hearings are actually scheduled, we'll be putting notice on the website, emailing people so they are welcome to attend, either to make public comment during or just to watch.
So we did get another question from Alex Franz. They ask, would a multiplex transitional shelter 90 days, for example, run by an agency for multiple families also be considered a short-term rental?
So the short-term rental, like the definition there that we're really looking at is that the less than 30 nights. So that wouldn't be the same sort of use. Let's see if I can pull up the chat and make sure. Was there anything else, Tate, that we missed as far as questions or discussion?
Not as far as questions. There's still some discussion happening.
Yeah, regarding the notice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we definitely still have time. So if people want to keep talking about notice, we can go back. We can go back to the slide about short plats. We can go to whatever slide makes most sense.
Theodore adds, thanks to you all for working on this. I like the amendments overall, but do have a bit of a personal issue with notification and awareness issues. Looking forward to the additional workshops.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
And this is really valuable information that we'll pass on when we talk to the Plan Commission and Council.
Yeah, it's great to hear a wide variety of voices on this issue. I think we definitely had some different interested parties at our workshop on Tuesday, so it's good to hear both sides, both from residents, people who are renters, people who are owners, people who work on the real estate development side of this equation. So it's nice to be able to hear from the public.
Yeah, and I want to acknowledge our turnout today was above 30 for a while, and now we're right at about 24 participants. So that's really great that you guys are interested and engaged. So please stay engaged.
Yeah, looks like we just have some more thank you comments coming in.
Yeah, and it looks like we were able to record this session, so we'll be posting it on the webpage, project webpage there that's shown if you probably Friday or Monday, or shapingspokanehousing.com. So thank you, everyone. I guess this concludes our session. Have a good evening.
Yeah, thank you.